All right, this is Derek Wolfgram again with Dr. Brunson. He's a clinical psychologist, and we had briefly talked about PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, and some of the signs and symptoms that are associated with that. And thank you for allowing us onto that. Right now, we're going to talk just again briefly about substance use disorder. Excuse me. It's been my experience that PTSD and extreme stress or anxiety can be associated with a substance use disorder. What are some of the signs and symptoms, and what are some of the things that you see when it comes to substance use disorder?
So, substance use disorder, as you noted, Derek, can sometimes develop for a person who has trauma or has had a lot of stressful experiences in their lives. In the short run, it can feel like, if I drink alcohol, it does work to sort of lessen my stress a little bit, helps me to relax for a little while. The problem over time, though, is that the negative consequences of using substances, whether it's alcohol or prescription opiates, maybe, or other drugs, cocaine or speed, some type of meth or methamphetamine, um, obviously work against whatever relaxing or distracting properties that a chemical may be having, specifically alcohol. Um, when it might help us initially, for example, to feel like we can go to sleep. The problem is with it in the night, as we metabolize it, as our body kind of metabolizes the alcohol, it actually produces chemicals that are actually going to wake us up, or at least bring us out of deeper levels of sleep. So it's
Okay.
going to interfere with our sleep ultimately.
Mm.
But some of the signs or symptoms we would look for and folks would talk about would be things like if they're using a substance to the point where they've developed some tolerance, and so they need to either take more of the chemical, the alcohol, or the other drug to get the same effect, or by the use of the same amount, they have less of an effect over time.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of tolerance. If they were to stop using, like for example, alcohol, for people who are quite dependent, what we used to call alcohol addiction, if they stop because they're literally physiologically as well as psychologically addicted to the substance, um, they begin to go into withdrawal, and
Okay.
which is a very uncomfortable place for people to go
Mm-hmm.
if they've been on higher levels of using alcohol, and then suddenly they're withdrawn from it, or they stop. They can go into withdrawal, but often folks who are developing a pattern of using a drug or a chemical for effect, uh, that's kind of, it's not like you're going out and having a drink socially with some friends, for example, but it's more like, they might be drinking alone or using drugs by themselves. It's not kind of a social thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about kind of self-medicating sometimes for some people. And that's certainly, you asked about trauma and stress, and like first responders, it is an issue for first responders where, like for example, alcohol use disorders are a problem, because alcohol is legal, and so people kind of start using that to sort of manage their stress, manage their anxiety, and then over time it becomes something they kind of depend on. Oftentimes, a person has developed a substance use disorder, a more severe one. They've got family or loved ones that are saying to them, "Hey, there's a problem here,"
Mm.
and so there's there's a lot of denial and resistance sometimes that can happen for a person, because it's tough to hear that from our loved ones when they're telling us, hey, you've got an issue here, you know, this is not working well for you. And
Yeah.
so
Wow. And you actually brought up a good point that made me think that, you know, when it comes to substance use disorder, uh, does a person get maybe not addicted, but do they start using substances to self-medicate, or are they, you know, because maybe they're suffering from depression, or are they depressed and so they start to self-medicate?
it's
Does that make sense?
that's
Like the
kind
egg
of
before the chicken kind of
that's
thing.
kind of a chicken or the egg question. It is. And I think sometimes folks can initially begin to, you know, maybe experiment with or use a little alcohol, and it's just social, and it's, you know, it's not a problem necessarily. But as they continue to use that, you know, it can become something where it does develop, and it initially can seem to help with, say, if I have anxiety or if I have a depressive disorder, but over time, just as you know, it can actually contribute to my depression or my anxiety, and kind of cause the very problem I initially was thinking, oh yeah, a couple of drinks will help me relax here. And it actually might even would make it worse over time if I get to have a problem with it, you know. So
So it
you're
just
right.
becomes like a vicious cycle,
It
and
can. It sure
wow,
can. Yeah.
wow. So we're approaching on 7 minutes. Are we okay to go with like a last section,
If you
just really
want,
quick? Is
sure.
that okay? Okay, perfect. So we're just going.